Hi, everyone. Welcome back to WorkTech. It's George LaRocque, and I'm really excited to have a new conversation today with a company many of you may or may not have heard of called BillionMinds. BillionMinds is a company that I've been working with for a while because they came through our Impact WorkTech Accelerator last year. And I was really excited to catch up with them about the progress they've made and how they're working with employers that this might sound like you that are struggling with the shift to hybrid work and sort of the on again, off again hybrid work environment. And I have Paul Slater, the CEO and founder of BillionMinds, with me today to tell us all about their journey and what they're working on. Paul, welcome.
Hi, George.
It's great to see you, and thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so why don't we start with if you could tell everyone about yourself and about BillionMinds and what it is. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit about me initially. So interestingly, I've been working outside of a formal office setting pretty much for my entire career, which began all the way back in, I guess, 1994 was when I stepped out of college. And in that entire period, I think probably maybe about 2 years or something like that in a formal office setting. And so when we founded BillionMinds, which was just a little bit before the pandemic, my co-founder and I were really, really interested in the skills that you needed in order to thrive in this kind of like unstructured, ambiguous world that is work today. And then we thought initially it was probably going to be like a research project, something along those lines, maybe even a book, that we were just going to learn a great deal about this and try to bring that wisdom to other people. And at that time, we did hundreds of interviews. I think initially around 300. We're well into the thousands at this point, because we just really wanted to find out what the how of work was like these days and what it was like in reality for most people, when in a world where work and the rest of our lives are merging and you're this far away from the next interruption, either non-work interrupting your work or work interrupting your home life. And as I say, then the pandemic hits, and a great grand social experiment effectively happens, right? Millions of people who had never worked outside of a formal office setting all of a sudden were, in the most trying of circumstances, right? A world in which you were trying to get your work done in one room, and your spouse or significant other was trying to get it done in another room, and the kids were in a third room, and everybody interrupting each other and all this kind of stuff, like this massive social experiment as to how work was done. And it became really apparent to my co-founder and I that just writing a book or a research study on this wasn't really going to cut it. It wasn't going to help all the people out there that needed to be helped. And so our journey really began then in terms of okay, what do we do to be able to take a set of behaviors that work, that are proven to work in unstructured, ambiguous environments, and embed them as behaviors in employees much more broadly, kind of democratize it, as it were.
Yeah.
And so that was the original theory. And that's when we first began actually working with you, George. Since then, what we've realized is that the group of people that really find this the most challenging are the people that are regularly working outside of a formal office setting, and probably the people that have not headed back into the office. And from an organizational perspective, the challenge is, how do you go about making sure that your employees that are outside of the office are engaged and are doing great work and have the skills necessary to do it? And so that's really kind of been the aha moment for us. We realized that it's a set of skills. This is a skills problem. And we have focused our platform on identifying what those skills are and then embedding those skills in people, and then ultimately certifying those people so that they can be confident and their employer can be confident that they can do great work from anywhere, including outside a formal office setting.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. It's we share some things. Over 30 years of experience, I probably spent 5 of them, in an office. Some of it was unintentional. Even when I had an office for a while, I was just traveling everywhere.
Mhm.
But I've hired hundreds of people, managed hundreds of people remotely, around the world, commuted from the Northeast in the US to the western part of Canada as a general manager of a company out there, but all of our employees were all over the place.
Mhm.
That was so I really adapted to remote work decades ago, and my litmus test back in the day was, if you haven't worked remotely, then I wasn't sure I had the time to invest for you to figure out whether it was for you or not, because you're right, it is a skill. It takes discipline, it takes habits, it takes a comfort level with that environment. And I think we're seeing individuals and employers struggle with, how do we make this work? What were some of the you mentioned some aha moments, some insights. I'm curious along the way with because you were clearly listening to your customers.
Mhm.
What were some of those insights that you gleaned that had you, move to this model where you're, certifying this approach to work?
Well, George, I think I'll start with kind of the aha moments on the employer side, right? And then there are some obviously on the employee side as well. But on the employer side, what we found is that many employers have, unsurprisingly, because of the pandemic, kind of stumbled into a hybrid model, and they've done so in a way that hasn't really kind of taken into account all of the different challenges that need to be resolved when you've not got just a small group of employees that have sort of self-selected into working remotely, but a large group of employees that are now working inside remote teams or hybrid teams. And so some of the things that employers are missing in some cases are things like, okay, what is the new set of policies, for example, that can actively support and encourage a hybrid workforce? What is the right way of communicating how this hybrid workplace is going to work inside the organization? What are the shifts associated with culture that are necessary inside the organization in order for this to work? It is if you're fundamentally changing how people work, that does have an impact on culture. It will change your culture in some way, shape, or form. So how are you going to get ahead of that and how to manage that? But then, as I say, the key one was that these skills that you built up gradually over time, and I built up gradually over time through my lived experience, that they're not just naturally there in everybody, right? And so the thing that I often equate it to is running, right? So we can all kind of run, right? But when you and I run for a bus or something like that, my guess is, I don't know what kind of a runner you are, George, but my guess is that when you and I run for a bus, we don't run like an Olympic athlete, right? So these are very different, like we're doing the same thing, we're running, but we don't do it in the same way with the same level of skills. So you take somebody out of an office and you put them in another setting, they can kind of work, right? They can kind of do the job, but are they going to do it with the same level of skill that they had in the other setting? Likelihood is no, unless they've consciously worked on the skills. And so for us, that meant going out, doing primary research, and finding the people that do this really, really well, identifying what those skills are, and then figuring out, as I say, how to embed it in the employees. So I think many employers right now haven't quite got to a point where they've understood and internalized the fact that this is a solvable skills problem, and that if you can equip people with those skills, then you're going to get significantly better results. And then the last thing I'll say is kind of how invisible some of this is. So the interesting thing is that if you think about it, the default state when you're in an office is visible, and the default state when you're working out of an office, working from home, is invisible.
Yeah.
And that has a whole bunch of different connotations to it. But one of them is that you're not really hearing from employees in the same way that you were hearing from employees about this very experience. And so you likely are, unless you're explicitly listening for it, you likely are missing things about the hybrid work experience that you would have naturally picked up in an in-office experience before. So things like, for example, intra-team dynamics, when you've got some people that are working in the office and some people that are working outside of the office, and how do those people gel together in a team setting? It's difficult to pick up those kind of signals when half of that picture is not next to you.
Right, right. So how does the product, how is it delivered? How does this present itself to the employee?
Mm-hmm. So we're software as a service, and this actually is a little bit of our evolution. We began with software, and then directly connected to the software was coaching, one-on-one coaching. We still offer that, and quite a few employers are availing themselves of it.
Okay.
But the software as a service is really built around something that we refer to as a learn, do cycle. So if you're going to just take things that are, sort of theory, and you want to embed it, then there has to be a connection between the stuff that you're learning and how you go about applying it. Otherwise, it all just sits up here as knowledge and doesn't sit up here as behaviors. So we accomplish that through things that we refer to as learn, do experiences. Each one of them is about 10 minutes total in length. So you're basically learning for about 2 of those minutes, and you're practicing for about 8 of those minutes. And then that corresponds, if you like, to a little micro skill that you're building up. And then collectively, those build upon each other. There's about 70 of them currently, but we're adding ones all the time. They build up over time, and you get to a point where we can measure effectively that your skills have built. And so at that point, we're at a point where we're able to issue the employee with a remote work professional certification, which then, as I kind of mentioned before, makes this measurable, right? Makes it to a point where the employee has confidence that they can do really good work from any setting. And probably at least as important, the manager and the organization have that confidence as well. So in some cases, that's more of a bottom-up effort where employees are self-selecting into it. In other cases, employers are saying, you know what, if I'm going to actually do this properly, how my people work, I keep saying my employees are the most important thing. My people are the most important thing. Well, I need to give them the skills to do this well, and I need to take it seriously. And so in those cases, it's sort of more of a top-down thing where you're saying, okay, for anybody that is going to be working remotely, the certification becomes part of that.
Yeah. Well, and managers are employees too. So
That's right.
As a manager, you're certified and understand how to approach this work and be a more effective manager in this environment.
Yeah, we're actually developing a manager-specific track for that, because you're right. They have the role of being the employee as well, right? And they have to be effective. But obviously, there's some additional stuff that you need in order to be able to manage it well. And in particular, it kind of alludes to some of the stuff that we were talking about before, like the intra-team dynamics and things like that. Like if you are a manager of a hybrid team, if you think about it, even the people in the office are remote in the sense that they are remote from the other people that they are working with, right? And so all of those, you need those skills basically throughout the team in order for that to work well. And as a manager, you need to be able to manage that situation in a different way than you would do normally. Yeah.
It's, I run a big community of HR professionals, and to this day, one of the most active topics, which this started at January of 2020, and to this day is the struggle with remote work. And now it presents itself more as a particular manager, department, CEO having having trouble trusting that the work will get done, even though we just came out of this period of high productivity through remote work. And I think this, you talked about the invisible nature of hybrid work, remote work, and you talked about giving them something that's more measurable. And the old adage that those old school face-to-face types love is, if I can't measure it, I can't improve it, right? And so it's almost an insurance or assurance policy for a manager who may be struggling themselves with this concept, and knowing that the team's equipped is I think it's very smart the way you're approaching this. And how are you getting this out in the hands of customers right now?
I'll get onto that in a sec. There's one thing I really wanted to touch on there, because it was so important, George. You said that the trust piece is difficult, and also if you're going to manage it, you got to measure it. Both of those things, I think, still hold today, and they hold very well. But it's a question of what you measure and how you trust. So in terms of what you measure, right? There are various things out there, various pieces of software out there that are like surveillance tech and things like that are measuring things stuff. like mouse movements, or even there's some tech out there right now that will measure things like eye movements, so to check to see, are you engaged on a day-to-day basis, right? And it's very big brothery, right? And so that might feel like the way to accomplish this, right? Because you're like, okay, well, at least I can measure that they're doing something. And maybe if I can see what tabs they've got open, hopefully I can measure that they're doing the type of work that I need them to do. But of course, it's massively counterproductive. It's massively counterproductive because you're basically saying to the employees, we do not trust you, right? And as you've probably seen, right, there are one of the best-selling things on Amazon this year is a little device that moves your mouse around for you, right? And so that you can pretend like you're working when you're not. And so employees are either leaving, or they're devoting a disproportionate amount of energy to try to circumvent the surveillance that is going on. So it definitively states that there is no trust there. So what you need to measure is not minute by minute what an employee is doing. You need to measure what does the employee have the skills necessary to do this well? And that in itself, once you are measuring that, leads to a higher trust environment than you would have otherwise, because it's increasing your confidence and allowing you to let go more, so the employee feels empowered and the trust is repaired between the employee and employer. So I couldn't let that go, because it's such
that's great.
It's such an important thing. To answer your question about sort of how we're getting this out to people, that's actually shifting right now. So as I mentioned earlier on, to date, it's kind of been a blend of the software that is provided to organizations. It's employers that we predominantly sell to, and as I say, sometimes it's certification led, sometimes it's more of a bottom up effort. But that combined with coaching. But we've been able, now that we've created these individualized learn do experiences, and we've been able to instantiate all of that in software, we can now create a full software only package that basically is just rolled out as classic software as a service. Employees just sign up and away they go, or employers just sign up their employees to do it. And so that is 100% self-guided. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for being here today. Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes and watching you take off.
Really appreciate it, George.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.